Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. And on today's episode, we dive into another big question. This one about Tomas Hertl, and if last year the reasons to panic or was just a bump in the road for Tomas Hertl. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. You can follow along or subscribe for free wherever you get podcasts. And of course, check us out on YouTube as well, where all the episodes drop first. And today we're going to be talking about Tomas Hertl. Very kind of polarizing season from Hertl last year where, it just didn't feel like the same Hertl that we've come to know and love from the past couple seasons. And of course, there was the Sharks trade the wrong player with the Hertl Meier debate. So we're going to kind of talk about Hertl, look at why the last season wasn't as bad as we think, and what kind of steps that we can improve to, or that Hertl can improve to kind of find his game again. So before we get into all that, I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you guys by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so with Tomas Hertl, way we're going to start this, of course, is we're going to kind of do a nice little review, look at his, numbers, look at the analytics. What do they tell us? And then we're going to kind of dive into what if this season was really as bad as we think it was from Hertl, and kind of finally end up where Hertl, kind of the steps Hertl can take to improve going forward, and maybe what the Sharks can do to help Hertl kind of put him in the best position to succeed. So Hertl, of course, played 79 games last year. Was the 3 games he missed, 2 of them were for a suspension, which was a head shot, if I recall, back in December. Warranted, don't hit guys in the head. And then he missed a game from the birth of his child. So fully healthy last year from Tomas Hertl. Again, missing 2 games for suspension and then the birth of his child. 22 goals, 41 assists last year, had 183 shots on goal, averaged 19-17 time on ice, Corsi 4 or shot attempts at 5v5, 52.47, goals for 43.80%. And that number is kind of out. That's I think what we're going to dive into here more in a little bit. His numbers from the Athletic, his player card. Remember, he's in the first year of his new $8.1 million contract. Market value 7.3. So apparently he's slightly overpaid. 93 percentile in time on ice, 73 percentile for goals. And then assists, 91st percentile, points, 87th percentile with 60, projected 68 points. He ended up with 63 or whatever. So expected goals for 33. So a little bit kind of under there. And we'll get into that number here in a second, 94th percentile. Defense, I think, is again, what we're going to be kind of harping on here with Tomas Hertl, with his defensive 30th percentile from the guys over at Athletics. Evolving hockey card, not pretty at all. 22 percentile for a first line center, 64 percentile offense. The defense, again, 8th percentile. Goals above replacement, expected goals above replacement were both, like 3 or 4, kind of in that range for him. But the defense there, goals above replacement defensively was -4. So you give up 4 more goals than you should have, type of situation. Expected goals above replacement. not good as well. Penalties, didn't draw as many as you would expect. Took a little bit more than you would expect. Plenty of power play time, 235 minutes. Only put 18 minutes shorthanded, which is kind of expected, especially when you have guys like Steven Lawrence, Logan Couture, Nick Menino to start the season, and you had Matt Nieto, you had plenty of other guys who kind of Nico Sturm who can kind of shoulder that load. So that way Hertl can kind of play more offense. So wasn't the prettiest season for one Tomas Hertl when it comes to kind of the counting stats, but it really wasn't I think it really wasn't that far off from last year. Like I said, I think the big thing for him was kind of that defense. And what I did basically is I kind of looked at, with Hertl, is it Hertl? Is it who he played with? Is it the team? And I think it's a little bit of everything, right? And I think it might just be a little bit of bad luck for Tomas Hertl. Digging into kind of like, if you look at his analytics, kind of especially comparing last year where he had a great season, right? They signed him to a new contract. You felt like Hertl, this is going to be kind of Hertl going forward. And I really, really think it might just be kind of a bit of bad luck for Tomas Hertl, to be honest, especially with the goals given up. And I'm not a big plus minus guy because there's so much stuff that could go, you could do things right and somebody else on the team, right? Like there's so many things that have to go into one scoring a goal and one giving up a goal. And you can do something right, but if the goalie, which we've talked about the goalies so far, how bad they were, we talked about that on Monday, you could do stuff right, and then all of a sudden, they just let in a bad goal. Or Tomas Hertl had plenty of just bad kind of mental errors. I'm sure you guys are all thinking of the same goal from the Toronto where he just literally just gives it up. It's a 1-1 game late in the third period, just a terrible pass. And then all of a sudden it's 2-1 and, the Leafs go on to win that game. This season, for example, he was on the ice for 68 goals against, while his goals for were 53. The 68 was his highest in his career. The second highest was the 2018-2019 season where he was on the ice for 60, but counteract to that would be on the ice for 63 goals. So, a +3, if you will, at least at 5-on-5. So I think we're going to dive into kind of the rest of the analytics and then look at what Hertl needs to do to kind of, get back and what the Sharks need to do for him to kind of get us back to the Tomas Hertl of old. But before we do that, do need to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at Gametime. You guys, right now, it is that time of year where you're trying to buy tickets, especially with summer coming up, concerts, plenty of sports. You maybe want NBA playoff tickets and go Warriors, go Kings. Maybe your baseball. We have the A's and the Giants back, of course. Now, but the hassle trying to buy tickets, right? Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Great thing about it, there are flash deals on last-minute tickets. It's easy to find and buy tickets to any kind of event in your area. You also get to see where you're going to sit. There's nothing worse than, buying a ticket and it's a terrible seat. So you can actually see where you're going to have. Lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection. Doesn't matter. They got you covered there for in case something happens. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so the big question with Hertl was this year really as bad as we think it was, especially compared to the Hertl of old, right? And kind of before we get into, why the reasons might be it wasn't that bad, I pulled up Hertl's 3-year card from Evolving Hockey, and I'm going to have this up on the screen right now. His numbers in the past 3 years are outstanding. 88th percentile as a first line center, 86th percentile, 73rd percentile defense. And this is for the 2020 season, the 2021 and 2022 season. So the year's ending. So we had the COVID season after the COVID, and then the COVID bubble, the weird kind of season after. Anyway, Hertl's numbers are really good, especially the defense, even straight defense there. I'm more inclined to believe that this was a kind of blip on the radar, especially defensively, just because of the roster turnover that we have seen from the Sharks. I know as a first line center, you are supposed to kind of pick up the slack and kind of make your teammates better around you, but we know, right? Not one person can do everything by themselves. Looking at what Hertl has actually, at his analytics this year, a lot of his numbers are better than last year. Expected goals for this year, 62.37. Last year when he scored 33 goals, he was at 50.18%. Expected, scoring chances this year 4. He was in the ice for 715 scoring chances compared to 607. I know he played with Erik Karlsson and he played with Timo Meier a lot this season, but he's still out there doing positive things. And it's not like those guys weren't around last year. And I know both those guys had amazing seasons. High danger chances. Hertl was on the ice this year for 322 high danger chances. Last year was 259. High danger chances allowed, again, pretty comparable to last year. 249 this year, 238 high danger chances. So the defense there was pretty similar. High danger goals for 31. Last year was 34. High danger goals allowed, 31 this year, 28 last year. So again, really comparable numbers when it comes into that. Even the zone starts this year, he had way more offensive zone starts, 435 compared to 348 last year. Neutral zone starts, 388 compared to 315 last year. And defensive zone starts, he got better zone starts this year. So I honestly think it was just kind of bad luck for a lot of it for what happened to Hertl. We know after Mike Greer talked about at the kind of the exit interviews that Hertl kind of needs to work on his consistency, especially when it comes to his leadership qualities, right? And not letting these things kind of bug him. And that's something we've heard from Hertl the past couple of years, and not just from Quinn and Mike Greer, but also from Bob Bugner as well. Just Hertl, he wears his emotions on his sleeves. And when things don't go well, sometimes, we've seen Hertl get really frustrated. And I think this year was a very taxing season, especially for Hertl and for all the Sharks fans too, for all the Sharks players, of just how everything that kind of felt like it could go wrong this season did go wrong. So that's why I'm inclined to believe that Hertl's offensively, he was a point off of what he did last year. Again, so he had 30 goals last year, 34 assists for 64 points in 82 games. This year, in 79 games, he had 22 goals, 41 assists, and 63 points. But last year, again, plus minus is a terrible number. -9 this year, -36. I think it was just bad luck and what we've seen from the Sharks all season of everything that could go wrong went wrong. And every time something could go catastrophically wrong, it did go catastrophically wrong. So that's why I'm not as worried, to be honest, and with Hertl and what going forward. I think there's things to improve on, and one of those things I think is actually going to be him shooting more. I think this year he deferred to Timo Meier a bit too much, and I know, especially after the first 8 or 9 games, Timo Meier was a man on fire this year until he got traded. I went through Hertl's kind of game log, and 57 games before he played 57 games before Timo Meier got traded. During that time, he had 15 goals, 33 assists, 48 points, and he took 125 shots. Averages out to 0.26 goals per game, 0.58 assists per game, 0.84 points per game, and 2.19 shot attempts per game. Okay, not too bad. Especially those point numbers, 0.84. Those are very, very good. Afterwards, so in 21 games after Timo Meier got traded, he had 7 goals, 0.32 goals per game, 8 assists, 0.36 assists per game, 15 points, 0.68. And he took 58 shots, which is 2.64 shots per game. So he jumped up by nearly half a shot more per game. Well, that doesn't sound like much. If you're taking more shots, you're just more likely to score. And we saw that with his goal production also jumped up by nearly a tenth of a goal, or 0.05 goals per game. So put in perspective for Tomas Hertl for how his seasons went. So 21-22, he had 30 goals. He shot he had averaged 0.37 goals per game. Assists, he had 34 at 0.41 assists per game. Points, 0.78 points with 64 assists, and he had 205, which is basically 2.5 shots per game. This year, assists, the goal numbers were down, like I said, 22.28 goals per game. The assists, 0.52 assists per game with 41, and then the points was 63, and he had 0.8. So he actually had more. His points per game was actually better this season than it was last year. Numbers pretty close, just more assists. Again, I think deferring to Timo Meier a tad too much. And his shots were at 2.32 shots per game this season total. And then in comparison to his, I looked at from the 2017 to 2022 season. So I kind of, that chunk of where we saw Tomas Hertl really establish himself. So that age 24 season till last season, 336 games, 0.36 goals per game, assists 0.42 assists per game, points 0.78 assists per game, shots though 2.88. So I think that is right there is what Hertl needs to do more going into next season. Before we kind of dive into kind of the shots and what else the Sharks can do for Tomas Hertl to make sure that we get the best Tomas Hertl going forward. Do want to take a quick break. Thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, we're going to be talking about Kaapo Kähkönen. And if he's the answer, or if it is time to give up on the potential of Kaapo Kähkönen kind of being that number one goalie. So make sure you guys are locked in wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. So I think that's the first thing Tomas Hertl can do next year is be a bit more selfish, especially with your shots. We know what type of player Hertl is. I think this year he became a little bit too much of a facilitator. Maybe he's trying to help us, but I think he kind of said that, right? Trying to help out Timo Meier a little bit too much. And Timo Meier is an amazing player who had an amazing year for the Sharks and the Devils, right? Hitting the 40 goal mark. But all right, Timo Meier is gone. You have to be kind of the offensive force for this team going forward. You know, we talked about Logan Couture next year, and I expect Couture to kind of continue to be the guy, especially if Nico Sturm plays the way he does, and if Alexander Barabanov plays with Logan Couture. But I think for Hertl, though, he needs to be more selfish, and I think he needs to shoot more. And I think he's going to have that opportunity next year, especially without a guy like Timo Meier. that's the big thing, is him kind of refining his shot in that offensive game. And, he's starting to get a little bit older. We know Hertl wasn't the fastest guy ever, but kind of finding that quote unquote old man game of just being smarter than some of the guys you're playing with, that positioning, kind of starting to edge into that next phase of Tomas Hertl, especially a guy coming off 2 knee surgeries, right? We know, again, Hertl's never the fastest guy, but it's not like he's going to be getting much faster. So I think for him, making sure he's in the best possible shape, trope alert coming into next offseason, but, just being more selfish with his shot. And that doesn't mean go out and shoot 8 or 9 times a game, but kind of, getting back to that 25 to 30 goal scorer that we know Tomas Hertl can be. And I think finding the right teammates, I think this is the right line mates for Hertl. And I think finding a top 6 guy who can kind of be a little bit more defensively detailed, but still provide like a good 2-way winger for Hertl, right? Most likely he's going to have a guy like William Eklund on his wing. That would be mine, or maybe like a Jacob Peterson, kind of a younger guy who's maybe still kind of figuring out their way. So I think going out and getting maybe someone who can be a bit more defensively oriented or defensively detailed to partner with Hertl, but can still be a 15 to 20 goal scorer with Hertl. I think that is the best plan of attack for the Sharks. And there's plenty of time to dig into that. I don't have an answer off the top of my head of who I want. Waiting right now for Evolving Hockey is going to be putting out their contract projections. So, it's hard to try to be like, oh, just go get this guy. I want to be realistic, right, about that. And I think this is, as I kind of build my roadmap for the Sharks to kind of start to turn things around, that's going to be one of the things, right, is they're going to have a little bit of cap space. How do you utilize that? Do you go out and try to find a top 6 guy who can play with Hertl and help out Hertl and kind of be that, kind of be an answer, right? Be the Barabanov for Hertl, and then you can have a nice Eklund on your wing or Jacob Peterson, and then your second line you can have Couture, Barabanov, and Eklund, or a Jacob type of player. So you're starting to kind of build legitimate top 6 lines instead of just a bunch of middle to lower 6 guys who kind of playing up in their role. So so I'm personally not, I think this was a blip in the road. I think a lot of things happened defensively, or a lot of things out of Hertl's control that hurt his defensive numbers. So going forward, I expect Hertl to kind of bounce back, especially the defensive numbers. I think I think the Sharks defense wasn't as bad as it looked, and that's something we'll get into here pretty soon about whose fault it was, right? I think you can place the blame to a lot of this on the goalie's feet and them not making as many saves as you would have liked or hoped to. Again, there's defensive breakdowns. Hertl made a lot of mental errors that you would like to see him kind of correct. But I'm not worried with Hertl, as he's going to be starting year 2 of this 8-year contract with the Sharks. And I think we're going to see plenty of great days from Tomas Hertl, especially if he can go back to shooting more, being closer to that, almost 3 shots per game type of player, especially without having a Timo Meier to defer to as much. And then I think also for him, again, just finding the right line mates for him, I think it's going to be the big thing too. So yes, little cause of concern, but I think this was just a blip in the road for Tomas Hertl. I think we're still going to see good Tomas Hertl going forward. So thank you guys for checking out Locked on Sharks. If you missed double episode yesterday, So we talked about Logan Couture, and then we also had Sam McGilligan on to talk about Andrew Cristal. So if you haven't checked those out, go check those out. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Kaapo Kähkönen as he enters the final year of his contract. And if it's the Kaapo Kähkönen experiment might be over here soon. So make sure you guys follow along wherever you get podcasts. So subscribe or follow for free, and make sure you check it out on YouTube where all the episodes drop first. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at My Fry Hole. And I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, bye, friends.